So I sent him an email thanking him for setting up the inspection, because that was really helpful, because now we've been recognised as not a school. Just thought he'd rub his nose in it, you know, make him feel bad, because what he tried to do, he'd failed. So that's another. But we took the inspector seriously. You know, we had to go right there, inspect. Right, I'm going to take it seriously. But we'd also made certain that we had in place, I think, arguments against it. The interesting thing is that in the UK we have something called a law that you can get information about yourself if it's stored by authorities. So it's an act giving you right of access to information. And so we asked for a copy of the report, and we were turned down both by Ofsted and by the Department for Education. And we appealed into them, and they still won't give it to us. And we think it's because it's a good report and they don't want us to use it. We could appeal to a kind of ombudsman type person, but we're not sure if we do that whether that would set off problems with the government, and we don't really want to have anybody bothering us. So unless we get bothered in the future, we're just going to let it lie. But we did wonder whether to appeal to it's a commissioner whose job it is to implement the act and to make certain it's done fairly. So that's a couple of examples of dealing with authorities, you know, and I think you have to be aware, prepared for anything really. You never know what's going to come up. So I always make certain I know the law all the time, because often the people we deal with don't know the law really well, and I sometimes find I'm talking to school principals who want to make radical changes, and I can explain how they can use the law, and they don't know the law. But then they're busy people. Well, so am I busy, but you know, I do think that it's important for us to know the law, know the rules. I make certain that I get access to government documents. So I think probably enough on the general thing. So now I can take Derry's question?
Yes, please.
So Derry's question was about, will the system collapse? And I'm not sure what's going to happen with the schools. In the past, in England, we've certainly had radical changes which were going towards a more positive end, more child-centred approach. And that has come from, like a government inspector 100 years ago was writing how schools needed to change because they were just, as he said, just laying a thin film of knowledge on children and hoping this was helpful, and this clearly wasn't. And so we've had radical people in the past who have promoted change for the better in the public school system. The climate at the moment is very negative, and the problem is that I think all the politicians are thinking in the same way, that they're very negative about alternatives. Do you want to take a break?
Just a minute.
¿Sabes dónde está Derry?
¿Quién?
Derry, que tenía que estar aquí. Si lo estoy buscando, sabemos que ir al aeropuerto.
Pero si se ha ido para allá.
Se ha ido,
Sí. He was looking
I thought it
for
was
Jerry.
important because he-
Yeah, sorry.
So I don't know what is going to happen, but I think that it could go two ways. But either way, I think it's important that we are outside the system, outside the public school system, and being successful, because we can show a different way of doing things. And we do go into schools and run programs for schools, so we don't ignore the schools, but we go in on our basis. So we go into a school and say, they often will say, we have these children with a problem, that they're being troublesome and we don't know what to do, could you do something? And I quite enjoy that. I enjoy working with usually bad boys, 13-year-old boys particularly in school. So but we go in on our terms. So we say, right, we will have in groups of 6, because that's the maximum we think you can work with. The group will create its own rules, that we'll have to obey the school rules, but within the group it will have its own rules that it will police. That each individual will be able to learn anything they like, so long as it doesn't break school rules. Each individual should be allowed totally free choice of anything that they want to learn, so long as there's no implications for the school. And also I want someone on the school staff to come and work with me so that they learn how to do what I do, so that we can pass it on in the school. And that's worked very well, and there is a film on YouTube about work we did with the University of Sussex, that we got funding jointly with the University of Sussex, and they did an evaluation of it, showed how successful the programme. And another university, the University of Brighton, did research to follow up with one school with the young people that we worked with. But again, what we're doing is to say, here's a model of a way of working, and unlike, I think, Derry's position as being things like, well, maybe we could ask for 20% of the week for people to make their own choices, but 80% the school decides. And I personally don't agree with that approach. I think what I want to do is to work with children who've got total freedom and have to struggle with what that means to make choices. So we do that in our own college and when we go into schools. And I think what we're doing is saying either there'll be some people in authority who will start to see the need for a change, but they'll need models of that, of which we and then Summerhill and other places can show a model. In other words, they're saying, well, there's a place here. Just like in the local authority, the strategy director could say, here's a model of something else. Unfortunately, there was a political change, and he didn't want to stay because he wasn't allowed to implement his ideas, so he left. So unfortunately, that didn't stay in the strategy document, but it's the notion that we could be a model, that people in authority could go, well, if that works, maybe you could do that in the public schools. The other scenario would be if the whole system collapses, in which case, again, somebody's going to need to go, well, what do we do in place if we can't just do nothing, and what are the options? And then we say, well, we are a model, not the model, but a model of what could be done. It's not saying people should copy it, but that we set very rigorous standards, but not the same as schools. So what we say is that the key thing is our 16-year-old student should go on to do something productive, usually going to college, and that is our objective, that they go and they do something productive. And we've shown 100% of our 16-year-olds that leave do that. They go on and do things, have successful careers, go to college, most go to university, but not all. But some go to work, but they all do something. Whereas no school can boast that, no public school or other private school, because you can get children who will get pass these exams at 16 that we have, and then do nothing. They end up criminals. They may end up suicide cases. The biggest cause of death amongst young people in the UK is suicide, but that's only been in the last 3 years. It's been the major cause of death. They may end up in mental hospitals, drug addicts, all sorts of reasons but just by passing exams doesn't guarantee that someone will actually go and lead a fruitful and helpful life. And we would make both a social argument and an economic argument, because it actually costs the state a lot to deal with people who are in the criminal justice system, or who are drug addicts, who are suicidal, or in prison. I mean, an interesting thing is, like, we don't tell children about learning maths or English. They do learn it because they choose. And people often challenge us, well, you have to teach it. And yet 60% of the occupants of the prisons in England are functionally either illiterate or innumerate, or both. In other words, they can't read and write, often literally can't read and write. And they've been taught English. But one of the reasons they're in prison is because they're illiterate, and therefore they don't know, they can't get a proper job, so they turn to crime, because how can you work if you can't read and write? So what we're saying is that costs huge amount. There are these for young people who are offenders in the UK. It costs around €200,000 equivalent more per year to put someone in one of these secure, what are called secure units for young offenders, and that's very costly. It costs anyone coming to us less than about €4,000 per year, to come to us. So there is an economic argument, there's a social argument that it is just a bad thing that we have crime and ill health, and therefore again there's a cost, both socially and economically. So we're trying to present a kind of rational scientific argument. I'm a scientist by background, that look, there is a better way of doing things. And I say, and I'm sure I repeat, so to answer Derry's challenge, I don't know which way it will go, but I know that we have to operate outside the public schools so that we can show something different that works better, and we couldn't do that if we're going in the public schools. And if the whole system collapses, we'll be there to help after it. That enough?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry for the interruptions.
Okay. Is
Yeah,
that enough? Do you
really.
think that will be helpful?
Yeah, it's a lot of knowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick
Yeah.
question, but that's for.
Yeah, you can ask me and I can.
Okay.
You can film. Yeah. If you
Okay.
want.
I'm not an expert on education, but I'm learning a lot with last year's FACE and this year.
Mhm.
And what I feel is that alternative education is more maybe, I don't know if it's the right word, but more holistic maybe.
Yeah.
Taking the person as a whole thing between things,
Yeah.
And do you think this is the big difference between alternative school and, let's say, traditional school?
Yes. Definitely. In England now, the rules are laid down by the government. Is that how schools are judged? Is that children have to be successful in 5 subjects. So English, maths, either history or geography, A science, and A foreign language. So what's been happening is schools have been stopping doing drama, dance, sport, art. All the people who teach those are being got rid of out of schools. So it's getting worse. And of course we know that the arts, I'm a dancer, so I know that this is really important to dance and to use your body but dance is not unintellectual. I mean, you have to think as well. I mean, there's a lot of theory behind dance. It isn't just you go perform, and the same in art and music is another area which is being cut back. Less musicians now. So absolutely, the situation is getting worse, and I agree. It is a holistic approach because we do exist as in bodies. We get ill, and we know that a lot of the mental health problems are caused by school. That we have, for instance, more self-harming amongst children. They cut themselves, which is crazy, but that's increased, and but it doesn't count. And if you judge a school, all you judge them on is those 5 academic subjects, and nothing else matters really in the school. And that's just crazy, because if you want people to lead a good life, a happy, healthy, fulfilled life, then they have to also, we have to address the mental health issues. Just a simple one. When I get back, there is some money being made available to study loneliness amongst teenagers. And somebody's done a survey in our area, and 60% of teenagers say they're lonely. Well, that's ridiculous. How can teenagers be lonely? But 60% of children, of teenagers, say they're lonely. Now we expect it amongst older people that there's a loneliness problem, and we have clubs for older people and things like that. But why do they feel lonely? Well, because the school doesn't take any notice of things like friendships and a community. The school is an institution, and what we have in a college is a community. So that, for instance, we just offer a program in the morning, and we said to our students, well, we could do something in the afternoon, and we'd actually quite like to do a program just in the afternoon. We didn't have our own premises before, so we couldn't do it. Now we have our own premises. We can do a program in the afternoon, and you could come in the afternoon rather than in the morning. And we know that teenagers don't like getting up in the morning, and also we know it's bad for their health. So of the 33, not one student wanted, and they said, well, we're with our friends, we're a community in the morning. We don't want to go to another an afternoon program. We maybe we struggle to get in for 9 o'clock in the morning, but we feel we're part of a family. And the notion that these children in public schools are lonely is bizarre, So I agree. It's about taking a holistic approach. It's about understanding the child. It's starting with their needs, not with the needs of what you want to teach them, but well, who is this young person here, and what do they need, and how can we help them to learn to lead a good life? And we have a little motto that what we want our students to learn is not to have a life of tests, but to learn about the tests of life. That life is complicated. The adult world is complicated. The world for young people is complicated. So we need to be resilient and thoughtful. We need to be mentally strong. We need to also know how to empathise with people, to care, to be good parents. One of the most important things as a human being is to be a good parent. Schools don't care. Whereas we want young people to learn about caring about other people, of caring about the people in their community, and we moved our location to a very deprived area, and we want to work in with the local community, our students working and showing that they care, not an artificial thing, but they really care. Okay, I think there's plenty for Dara there.
Okay, just one, but it's very short.
Yeah.
Any conclusions after your stay here in FACE?
Oh, well, I think it's fascinating that you have this event, which is really good. And I think the mixture of a lot of the arts, again, I like, because I can dance here and do Tai Chi sessions, as well as doing the head stuff, because I think this is really important. So I think that you don't get that at a normal education conference, So the music, so I was enjoying dancing to the band last night, it was just great. And I think people enjoying themselves. Why not? Education shouldn't be so serious and glum and gloomy. So I think it's great, and it's great that so many people come and are interested and want to maybe explore something different. I understand the numbers have gone up each year, and that something like 700 people maybe come. That's great. And hopefully there'll be a kind of critical mass, because I think in Spain obviously you have issues, just as we do in Britain, and technically I understand home education is technically illegal, but hopefully, as eventually there's so many people doing this that politicians have to accept that it's the right thing for people to do, that parents have the right to do the right thing for their children. So I think it's great. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
If you can. But we also had a difficulty with some of our politicians, and they're in a way sometimes more difficult because they can take a very ideological or doctrinaire position. And for instance, so we do have some of the sort of Marxist, Trotskyist elements, for instance, who think everybody should be compelled to go to their local school, and that parents and children shouldn't have freedom. They're against individual freedom, and they of course have this notion that there is a conflict between equality and freedom. I mean, there isn't necessarily, and I think the French are right. Liberté, égalité, fraternity, you can have all three, but they go, we want equality, so everybody must do the same, be the same. This, and of course I disagree with that, given my kind of anarchist principles. we've had problems with the politicians, and yes, you can have problems with the bureaucrats, and obviously we try hard to work with them, but if we can't, then we have to find ways of dealing with them. But again, it's not helpful. I think it was like our parents would feel more, I suppose, insulting and critical, which isn't necessarily a good way to do things, because then it makes the other person more defensive. But one strategy has been to keep the bureaucrats busy by giving them lots of paper, lots of people writing in, making certain that they know that they're going to be kept busy unless they address what our concerns are. And that sometimes works, because they go, I'm fed up with all this and would just give in, you know. And certainly we've had the same with politicians sometimes, you know, they kind of give in, especially when we've worked with parents who needed support. But it is, there is at times when you have to go through formal systems. For instance, we had a daughter that was quite autistic, 14-year-old, had a very difficult time, very autistic, wouldn't go on the bus, for instance. She couldn't cope with public transport, and she wanted the daughter to come to ours, and it ended up in a tribunal with a lawyer and 2 other people, and we won the case. But the downside was, of course, we made enemies within the bureaucrats. It cost them money to if they'd have compromised, then it would have been okay, but they didn't, and therefore the council ended up having to spend more money, and therefore that meant that we made some enemies, which wasn't actually very useful. And it's relevant to the whole issue of how to deal with authority, is that therefore one of the people who didn't like us in the council, some loved us and some hated us, so one of those from that camp phoned up Ofsted, the Office of Standards and Education, the government inspectors, and said, oh, these people are running an illegal school, you should come and close it down, because it's illegal to run a school that's not registered. So I was working in the college, and there was a battering on the door, so I went downstairs to the door, and there were two, it was a man and a woman, and they had the badge saying Ofsted, and they said, we're here to close you down because you're running an illegal school. So I needed to stall them, so I said, well, I need to check you out, because you could be anybody turning up with this, and you could be a paedophile for all we know, so therefore I must phone your office. That made me the chance to go inside, get my phone, tell everybody that the inspectors were here, and they, you know, warned them, then went back to the door, because I said, you must wait here while I get my phone to check you out, and then I phoned their office, and that took 10 minutes, so in the end it was okay. So I said, right, you can come in and you sit down, and I explained that, look, we have no curriculum, we have no lessons, we have no teachers, we have no classrooms, the students decide for themselves, we only meet in the mornings, and we don't have any of the things that a school has. Schools have classrooms, schools have teachers, schools have lessons, schools have timetables, schools have rules. We have rules, but the students create the rules with us jointly. So anyway, they were sceptical, but they went and talked to all of the students. At that time we had 18 students. We now have 33, but at that time we had 18. And they went and talked to individuals and asked them what they were doing, and obviously they were scattered around the building doing different things. I remember them going into kind of computer room, but it's not, you know, it was a quiet room, so somebody was on a computer talking about something, and another boy was sitting playing guitar, so they asked him what he was doing, and he said, it's kind of obvious, I'm playing a guitar, you know. and he was explaining that he was learning music. The last boy they talked to is a 15-year-old, and he'd taken some of these exams that Jerry mentioned a year earlier and had got top grades. And he wanted to go to the USA, to MIT, because he didn't think any English university was good enough for him, you know, that he was a whiz on the computer. So that was kind of impressive to the inspector. And after that, the inspector said to me, well, you say you've not got a curriculum, he said, but you have a broader curriculum than any school, because your children can study anything they want. So the two inspectors met, they had to have a meeting to consider the inspection, So they had a meeting for 10 minutes, and they came out and said, well, you're not at school, it's fine. So they went off, they wrote a report to the Department for Education in the government, and we got a formal letter from the government saying we're not a school. So we are probably the first recognised official non-school in the country, and because we have a letter from the government saying you're not a school, which is wonderful, because it means we can do anything we like and we don't have to have a curriculum or teachers or anything. So obviously it turned out well, but it could have turned out badly. And I knew the person in the council who made this phone call, because I knew where our enemies were.